So chaos exploded in Washington, D.C. earlier today when Donald Trump issued a widespread, unilateral, and illegal freeze on all federal spending. And we are dealing with the fallout. What's interesting, though, is that his deputy White House chief of staff for policy, the reviled Stephen Miller, appeared on Jake Tapper's CNN show and had a confrontation with Tapper, and it went about as well as you expected. To discuss this, I brought in a guest. I brought in a pal, an ally, my friend and yours, Luke Beasley of the 1 million plus subscriber Luke Beasley Show program. What's going on, Luke?
Hey, it's so great to be with you, except for all the horrible, horrible things that we're talking about.
Well, I don't even know where to begin with that. I mean, yes, there's so many horrible things we have to discuss. As a matter of fact, speaking of horrible, let's just play a clip of Stephen Miller. And again, you can already get a feel of where this interview is going to go. So here's Stephen Miller and Jake Tapper.
There's 2 million employees in the federal government. Overwhelmingly, the career federal service in this country is far left wing. I don't know that to be a fact. Well, I'll give you a great example. We looked at USAID as an example. That's 98% of the workforce either donated to Kamala Harris or another left-wing candidate, just as an example.
Okay, but let me just an entire workforce is having a
whoa. Did you just say that saying someone voted for Kamala Harris is demonizing them?
No,
so according
your suggestion is that there's a bias.
No, but you used the word demonizing. You just said that I'm demonizing somebody by saying they voted for Kamala Harris.
Let's get back on track.
But I am on track.
Okay.
Let me stay on track. What I'm saying to you is this. There are 2 million employees in the federal government.
Right.
They're overwhelmingly left of center. The American people, I got to finish the sentence.
Okay.
I got to finish the sentence. The American people voted for dramatic change implemented by Donald Trump. So it is a...
So, Luke, just a couple of things here. Number one, how charismatic is Stephen Miller? That guy should be in front of every damn camera in every damn setting, number one. And number two, when people voted for sweeping change, I'm curious, did they vote for like every Medicaid portal in all the 50 states to be shut down?
Funding for school meals, fire departments, schools in general, homeless veterans, etc. All of these necessary funds like this, as of now, my hope is that our outrage being expressed to Washington will quickly cause a shift in policy such that there won't be a huge impact, but we're already seeing the impacts of it. And what's interesting is I've actually talked to people. I'm not saying if you study this, it's the case, but I've talked to people within some of these organizations that do a lot of humanitarian work, and maybe it's not the association that Stephen Miller thinks, that a lot of the people who want to go help and uplift people in need, who want to implement humanitarian policy in developing countries, that many of them will have supported Vice President Harris in the last election. Maybe that association is not because there's some conspiracy against MAGA, but instead the type of people who vote for Harris. Obviously, that's an overgeneralization, but I thought that was an interesting part of it.
It is. And for him to like with this faux outrage, oh, I just said they were left wing. Why are you saying I'm demonizing them? Man, that's all you and the Trump campaign did throughout the previous campaign. You demonize blue cities, blue states, liberals, progressives, Democrats. You have sitting members of the Republican Party in Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a top fundraiser and ally of Donald Trump, publicly referring to the Democratic Party as an evil party of groomers and pedophiles. So don't miss me with this like faux outrage. I mean, Jake Tapper was right to call this out. And speaking of calling out Stephen Miller, we got to play some other clips from this interview because, again, it gets considerably worse.
We just talked to Congressman Don Bacon, a Republican, a Trump supporter. We just interviewed him. He said that there was a lot of confusion. He said that the executive order
created by the media, Jake. The OMB guidance memo, if you read it, is as clear as day.
It's pretty
my point is,
and confusingly written. Parts of it are about DEI, parts of it are all disbursement. It is...
Yeah, DEI is suspended. That is correct.
Right, no, I'm just saying, like, it's kind of all over the map, and there is confusion, and it's not just liberal media.
Jake, tell me...
Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski said...
You're not understanding what I'm saying.
But
I'm saying that
I want you to address this.
I will, but I'm saying that a false story was put out that people responded to. It's unfortunate that people put out a false story. That's all I'm saying, Jake.
Okay.
That's all
What is the false story that supposedly we're talking about that's fake? When it's the organizations themselves saying we're now experiencing issues related to funds that legally were owed.
Luke, listen. Luke, come on. Let's throw Stephen Miller a bone here. You obviously don't see how the liberal media shut down Medicaid portals in all 50 states. You don't see how the liberal media bamboozled dedicated career Republican elected officials. You don't obviously see that connection there, Luke. I mean, this is just willful ignorance on your part, isn't it?
I think, would you throw that back up there, Jade? Does he blame the liberal media for his strange posture too?
No, I mean, like,
it's really confusing. Dude. This guy stubs his toe. It's the liberal media's fault. Yeah, and this, honestly, as always happens with you, Josiah, I'm able to treat things, no matter the substance, more lighthearted than normal. But I think everyone acknowledges how honestly offensive and gross it is that from Caroline Leavitt today at the press conference, here from Stephen Circular Miller, and from so many others, this casual attitude of, come on, stop acting like this, is when there's utter and complete panic, lawsuits being brought by nonprofits, complete confusion about if schools are going to get the funds that they need. This is not a joke, and him smiling and scoffing about it really adds to the outrage.
Well, Luke, before you said offensive and gross, so of course my mind goes back to Stephen Miller, and we've got another clip to play. But before we do, again, the litmus test, that the game that you and I often play on video, and when we have conversations about what if the shoe were on the other foot. So I just want you to imagine this is President Biden's deputy White House chief of staff, and you have something similar where either deliberately or due to sheer reckless incompetence, the Medicaid portal in all 50 states is down, effectively freezing Medicaid for 72 to 78 million people. How would Stephen Miller react to that, Luke?
Yeah, we know. Let me pull something up while we watch this next clip too.
Yeah, and while you're pulling that up, let's go ahead and play, again, since you said offensive and gross. Here's another clip of Stephen Miller's disastrous interview with Jake Tapper.
How long is this review going to take, and when does the federal funding for these programs resume?
Well, in the original executive order that addressed NGOs, foreign aid, and other grants, that was a 90-day review process, as you know, Jake. But again, more fundamentally, I think we're missing the big point here. Do you believe, does anyone believe, that an unaccountable, career-tenured bureaucrat should be able to approve vast sums of money for the projects that they personally agree with, that no accountable employee in the federal government has reviewed?
I'm literally asking about Meals on Wheels. I mean, you know,
we are. But
Jake,
yes, Jake, you do know what I'm talking about. I'm telling you, as the memo says in black and white letters, no financial benefit programs to Americans are affected. No individual assistance programs are affected. It's there in black and white.
That's not what that means or what it's caused.
Yeah.
We always knew that the media was going to spin up fake stories to try to create controversy, to try to create scandal. I'm not saying you, Jake. I would never say you. I'm not saying you.
We invited you on to clarify, Stephen, and we just heard
and I'm here.
Right, I know, and I appreciate it. And I want to turn to immigration in 1 second, but I'm just saying, Republican Congressman Don Bacon was hearing from constituents. We have no idea where the constituents were getting their information from, but I will say, last night, when people started noticing this order, people were upset based on the executive order. I was hearing from them directly.
The executive order, Jake, the executive order was issued.
Is that enough, Josiah? Or is there more?
Yeah, no. Let
me read this quote because he's acting, quote, temporarily pause. This is from the memo itself. Temporarily pause all activities related to obligation or disbursement of all federal financial assistance. And there was that comment about direct benefits, carve outs for Medicare and Social Security. But what they're not understanding is there are things that get sent from the federal government directly to an American. Okay. But there's a bunch of stuff that gets funded, programs like Medicaid, where states get money from the federal government, and then they're the ones administering it. And so when those programs are not identified as, I guess, individuals, such that they are not a part of those carve-outs, then and this is across essentially all the programs other than a few that you could categorize as individual assistance, then all of these programs now have expressed themselves to be in limbo with funding. So it's extra upsetting that they're trying to blame it on the way that we're talking about it.
Yeah, especially when they are the genesis of the memo. It's on them to clearly communicate, to anticipate fears, and to quickly, with agility, respond to concerns, not just from, the liberal media and lib-cuck, Democrats, but also like their own party. And they failed spectacularly. And this is what it goes to show. We're just barely over a week into the second Trump administration. And once again, Donald Trump and his party refuse to take any sort of accountability, and they want to pass the buck when especially there's material harm for millions of Americans. Again, I keep going back to Medicaid, not that it was the only program affected, but they want us to believe that that was just sheer cosmic accident. Hell no, we don't want to touch Medicaid. But you did in your incompetence, your inability to govern. You're really good at waging culture war issues, GOP and MAGA, but you objectively suck at governing, and this is proof positive. One last clip I want to play. And again, just note the irony of what Stephen Miller has to say about Donald Trump in this clip.
The choice here is simple. It is very simple, and I want to state it clearly.
Okay.
Either Donald Trump gets political control over this government and ends the waste, abuse, and fraud on the American people, or we let bureaucrats autopilot federal spending. If we hadn't stepped in, then billions more dollars, as an example, would have gone to left-wing NGOs that fund and resettle illegal aliens and are complicit, in many cases, in facilitating child trafficking.
Okay, so
this administration will never, ever apologize for defending the American taxpayer.
Obviously, nobody's in favor of child trafficking. Let's move on to immigration.
How do you...
It's just great to just be able to just say things so freely and not have to worry about, fact checks or providing, substantive evidence for your claims. I can't imagine. I've said it before and I'll say it again. To be a MAGA influencer or a MAGA elected representative, you're playing the game of politics on easy mode. And it just goes to show how ill-equipped they are at governing, that they're still screwing it up. So, Luke, what do you think about this claim? Yeah, the choice is simple. Either Donald Trump takes control of the government and ends waste, fraud, and abuse. What do you think about that sentence? Donald Trump taking control, ending waste, fraud, and abuse.
It is... I saw on one of your segments today, you talked about Senator Chris Murphy breaking down calmly sort of different things. And I'm trying to remember if that was him or someone. No, now I'm actually blanking on who it was. It wasn't him. But they get so hyperbolic whenever we point to the authoritarianism. But one of the only explanations I've heard that makes any sense, because a lot of people are asking why. What is this? This isn't... Okay, I hate that he pardoned the January 6ers, but I see the MAGA logic. They say you can do violence in favor of Trump. If it's in favor of him, we'll give you legal immunity. So I can actually understand what they're arguing, even if I understand it to be crazy. But then with this, what is it that we have to pause all funding to federal initiatives so that we can review? Why not review why those programs go while they're going, I should say. And then if you find fraud, take it out. But what are you talking about? You have to pause needy children getting food to figure out if that food is actually fraudulent. And so then the only coherent explanation I've heard is if he can get the conservative Supreme Court, ultimately through legal challenges that have already been brought from nonprofits, et cetera, and even AGs, I think, are getting involved of different states. If they could get the Supreme Court to say, actually, Trump does have the authority to do with this money whatever he'd like, then now all of a sudden he has far more centralized power when the law, you'd assume, says that Congress allocates it, then the executive branch executes those demands. Trump's trying to demonstrate that the executive branch could actually do whatever they want. Do you think that's the end game here? What else?
Yeah, I think it's dual purpose. I have adopted the position, and I do mean this, that with MAGA elected officials and the core of the MAGA movement, not every MAGA Republican, but the real beating heart, such as it were, of the MAGA movement, I do think that cruelty is the point. I think that when they approach strategies, their thought isn't, how can we do this in the least painful, most humane possible? I think they deliberately choose things to maximize cruelty, because I think there's a real contempt for the American people and liberalism and progressivism at the heart of this movement. But in terms of the broader legal strategy, yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. So it has been the position of the Supreme Court but really all three branches of government for decades, for about 50 years, that the president cannot impound this idea that if Congress allocates funds for congressionally appropriated purposes, the president might have some flexibility about, okay, I'm going to give some of this money today and then a week from now. Like we see that, for example, with like arms shipments, for example, President Biden. The president has a lot of latitude about when they release tranches of, like congressionally approved arms and material. Like there's some discretion there. But the idea is if Congress says, hey, you have, let's just say $1 billion, then for this particular purpose, then you have to spend that $1 billion for that particular purpose. You might get some flexibility about when and where, $1 million here, $2 million here, whatever. But what Trump wants is basically the authority to defy Congress's constitutional right to not only fund, but to appropriate. You're getting this money and you will use it for X, Y, and Z. It's a power grab. And he has a right-wing supermajority on the Supreme Court, so it's entirely possible that they decide, you know what, I don't think Republican presidents should have constraints put on them about when, where, and how they spend the money. So yes, it's very possible that is why they're doing what they're doing.
So then the trajectory of give immunity to, or at least relieve of, legal accountability, folks who enacted political violence on your watch, then wipe out the people tasked with oversight of your agencies and the inspectors general, and then give yourself enhanced authority to essentially have centralized power with funds.
And Luke, we're only 1 week in.
I feel like there's a word for that, but I'm not going to say it. It really upsets them.
Oh, well, certainly it starts with an F. It's a particularly F-bomb, and people that we've debated take issue with that, so I guess we won't use it here. Luke, where can people find you?
At Luke Beasley, as long as Trump will let me have it, on YouTube.
At Luke Beasley on YouTube. And again, before we end up in the gulag together under Donald Trump, please like and subscribe. Luke, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thanks.